Greetings and happy Mother's Day. My name is Kai Christensen, and it's my pleasure to offer you just a brief introduction to this marvelous and eminently famous string quartet by Mozart that goes by the nickname The Hunt. Now, this music is Mozart. It's luscious, entertaining, emotional. It needs absolutely no technical knowledge or even historical context, but I want to share it with you nonetheless. Two ideas. First of all, the historical context of this marvelous piece, and second, to look into the music just a little bit, see how it's put together, how it works, and how it might relate specifically to this nickname, The Hunt. Now, for the historical context, we turn to Vienna in 1781 and what we would call not only the rise, but perhaps the first great flowering of the classical era, sometimes called the Viennese classical era, featuring the three most famous composers of the time, Haydn, Mozart, and eventually Beethoven. In 1781, Haydn, the eldest, would have been known as the greatest composer in all of Europe, famous for two things especially. One, establishing or at least perfecting the symphony, and founding or at least perfecting the string quartet. He had already produced several examples of both, but in 1781, Haydn came out with his latest and greatest, a new set of string quartets. Now, the string quartet, if you don't know, is an eminent and one of the most prominent ensembles in all of classical music. So extraordinary is its agility and its power of expression. A small ensemble comprising two violins, a viola, and a cello, again brought to its amazing state of genius almost single-handedly by Haydn. 1781, the latest quartets are out from Haydn. A younger Mozart is also on the scene, well known in Vienna, establishing himself as a brilliant composer. It so happens that he knew Haydn, was a friend and a colleague, and they often hung out together. And on one occasion, shortly after this release of the great new quartets from Haydn, Haydn and Mozart together are hearing a performance. Mozart is so astonished, so inspired by this new, masterful music coming out of Haydn for the string quartet that he resolves on the spot to write his own set of six in what we might say is the most sincere form of flattery imitation. But this is Mozart, after all. Now, Mozart is often known for conceiving of music almost completed in his head such that he could write it down almost perfectly with very few corrections or errors or changes. Not so with these great six quartets. It took him 2 years to, without commission, without any guarantee of anything other than the love of the art, to write these six quartets for Haydn, and he took the task as perhaps one of the most challenging things he ever did. We can see corrections, erasures, replacements, discarded ideas, all this tumult of activity until he finally, 2 years later, produces a set of six, which he publishes and dedicates with his own money, and dedicates lovingly to Haydn as the great mentor and inspiration. As such, these string quartets from Mozart have always been known as the Haydn quartets, Mozart's string quartets dedicated to Haydn, and they set an absolute new high water mark, unsurpassed to this day, some of the finest quartets in all the literature. That's the context. Number 4 in the series of 6 of the Haydn quartets, we find the one known by the nickname The Hunt. To listeners at the time, first of all, the idea of having a nickname at all suggests that this quartet would have been well known and beloved by listeners and players alike, The Hunt. And the nickname comes from the opening bars of music that suggest musically and one might say emotionally or psychologically to listeners of the time, like a fox hunt, being out in the woods and hearing the clarion call of the horns calling us in great sport and adventure. Here's the opening sounds, The Hunt. A lilting, animated motion, a fresh outdoor kind of sound in these simple open intervals that fall in the violins like horns calling us to hunt. Mozart elaborates on this feeling by giving us a sense of space and depth, of call and response. Much like on a hunt, we would hear a distant horn and then we would pursue it. And here is the near and the far. So here we have an elaboration of the idea, establishing this whole mood. Now, Mozart, we don't have no idea if he really was intending to evoke the idea of a hunt, but it's a great metaphor and a way to get into this music, because next he's going to introduce a contrast. All great music often relies on the idea of two or more contrasting ideas to make some tension and some depth to the music. For the next segment, the second main theme of this opening movement of the hunt, Mozart will introduce what I like to call the bird trill in the manner of our hunt analogy. It's a little 5-note twitter that is a very clear signal that we've moved into a different part of the music, and it sounds like this. Still the idea of a rollicking or animated motion, the falling intervals in the strings, much like the hunting horn, but now the second idea of the bird trill. So now we have the notion of two contrasting ideas, hunting horns and bird trills, and now Mozart can take us into the true adventure, the true chase, or the hunt, with what we traditionally call the development section. Here, Mozart is so overflowing with beautiful ideas that he starts the adventure, the development, with a brand new idea, a lovely, lilting, waltz-like dance. Now, the great excitement, the great hallmark of this classical style is again moving into a development where suddenly there's drama, there's fragmentation. There is not these complete resolved phrases, but a searching, a probing. And Mozart is going to do this most effectively by using our bird trill to give it some motion. Here's what the main dramatic development sounds like. This wonderful sense of probing, driving, searching, the hunt, the chase, and then erupting into sort of a bright zenith as the bird trills really entertain us. We are now done with the development and ready to return home with our quarry from the hunt, the return to the beginning, the reprise in the great classical form. And here we come back to the opening hunting horn idea, but always, as Mozart would do, fully elaborated and extended on its return for an even greater realization, an even greater coming home celebration. Listen how the hunting horn theme, originally simple and clear, is taken to a wonderful extension and elaboration here as a glorious hunting theme. The music in this one movement of one string quartet by Mozart is so full of light, lyricism, cleverness, endless invention that you can listen to it over and over again over the years and always hear something new. I'll tell you, coming back to me, that For me, it's a very special quartet. Personally, my encounter initially with the Hunt Quartet is what really opened my eyes and my ears to a great love of Mozart and chamber music in particular. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. It turns out that just like Mozart was inspired by hearing a performance of Haydn's quartets, so when these quartets were finished, Haydn joined Mozart for a live performance of Mozart's quartet. And in this case, Mozart would have been playing the viola himself. And we know this from Mozart's father, Leopold, who in letters described what happened. Mozart plays these pieces. It could well have been the Hunt Quartet itself. And Haydn, listening, turns to Mozart's father and says, remember, the most famous composer in all of Europe, says to Leopold about Mozart, before God and as an honest man, I can tell you that your son is the greatest composer known to me by person or by name. He has taste, and what is more, the most profound knowledge of musical composition. Need I say more? You're going to absolutely adore the string quartet and discover chamber music, Mozart, and the wonderful verve of springtime, the hunt, and great classical music. Thank you for listening. Enjoy, and happy Mother's Day.